Okay, I think we're probably ready to go. Welcome everybody. Welcome to the Basis Wednesday webinar. It's remarkable what a difference a week makes. Certainly looking out of my window, last week I was looking at blue skies. Today I'm looking at very grey skies there. The rain hasn't hit us yet, remarkably. But earlier on this week it was confirmed what we probably already knew, that this has been certainly the sunniest, if not the hottest spring ever recorded since records started in 1929. It's made lockdown a lot more palatable. Imagine if we'd had to squirrel ourselves away for weeks on end in dark winter, November, December, January time. So it's certainly been welcome from that perspective. But really, it is a reflection of the changing environment, the changing climate. So for us, it seems beneficial, but there's possibly a sinister side to that. But around the world, we've seen this week. There's been huge floods in El Salvador, 18 dead, at least 7 missing in those floods. The Indian monsoons are arriving, obviously completely natural, but their impact is increased by climate change. There's a tropical cyclone developing off the east coast of India at the moment. Saw some reports from Bangladesh about waste management, and they're picking tons of medical equipment, medical protective equipment off the streets with street collectors. Is there any way of making money? They're picking medical equipment with no protective equipment themselves. And we've seen that in the UK and other Western countries as well, with people just discarding gloves, discarding face masks. And I did see a short documentary about a Scottish village, and I've seen some stuff before, and apologies, I can't remember exactly where it was and the name of it, but on their beach, they get a huge amount of plastic washing up. It's just a freak of geography that the ocean currents seem to bring this plastic in. And one person commented to a local that they thought it was absolutely disgusting that the locals just throw their rubbish over the seawall and chuck it onto their beach. Couldn't be further from the truth. The locals hate that. It's just on this ocean current that brings it in, and they've actually found rubbish there from Australia, from South America, from North America, because it's on this kind of ocean current that pulls this stuff in. And they reckon that one beach in Scotland gets around 64,000 pieces of plastic. And we're talking, big pieces of plastic. We're not talking microplastics, but big chunks of plastic that come in. And going back to the PPE just for a moment, there's this perception of hygiene related to single use, and certainly that's being, a hospital situation is quite different. It's a very serious situation, so I'm not reducing down the impact of that at all. But there's a perception among the public developing that hygiene relates to single use, and that's something that possibly we're going to try and address a little bit today, because there is some evidence that even consumers at supermarkets, etc., are drawing that equation as well, and actually thinking that it's more hygienic to go for single-use and single-use plastics, and clearly that's pushing back where we were sort of pre-COVID, and this drive to actually go to reusables and other products, not single-use. So that's what we're going to try and address today. We're going to start looking at how sports venues can avoid single-use plastics, maybe looking at alternatives, but also actually looking at practical solutions as well. The practicalities, again, today, for those of you, I should have introduced myself at the beginning, I always forget that bit, but my name is Russell Seymour, I'm the Chief Executive of Basis, so welcome to everybody. In terms of practicalities, how we run this, many of you have been with us before, we do have a few new people coming in. We want this to be interactive. First of all, we'll have a presentation and some talks from our main 3 speakers, but we want this to be practical. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, please take your cursor down to the bottom of the screen and hover over participants, and you can raise your hand. Don't physically raise your hand, we probably won't be able to see you. Digitally raise your hand down to the bottom, click on participants and raise hand. You'll come to the top of our list, we'll ask you to speak. Everybody's muted at the moment to keep down background noise, so please, when you're asked, just unmute yourself, make your comment or your question, remember to remute again afterwards. But also please actively go into chat and put up points and questions in there as well. That's enough for me. We do have 3 speakers starting off today, and then we'll go first of all. Paul Foulkes-Arellano from the Sustainable Design Alliance is going to give us a quick presentation to start off with. Then we've got Alex Lewis, Venue Director from the Kia Oval, and Jon Surtees, Head of Media Communications and community at Surrey Cricket as well to talk through some of their pioneering. And both Alex and John will understand that I'm just about to say that through gritted teeth, because I was sustainability manager at Lords for 11 years. But genuinely, the Oval has pioneered a lot of these changes for sports venues in general in the UK, and are still pushing through and changing the way that they use their packaging and their plastics. So very happy to welcome Paul, Alex and John today, and I will hand over to Paul. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Russ said, I've got a few slides to share with you about today's topic, which I will try and do. I will now try and share my presentation, and hopefully you will be seeing today's topic, which is about single-use versus reusable serviceware, and really focusing on the alternatives, the opportunities, and really to build back better given the circumstances that we have right now, and a lot of the talk and misinformation and consumer worries that are flying around. Give a bit of context, this is not a new slide. This is something that's been on for quite a long time, but there's a very active lobbying industry funded by the plastics producers. They oppose single-use plastic bans and producer fees. They create these kind of false voluntary commitments, which you not monitor over time. They never happen. They oppose plastics taxes, and recently they've actually ramped up their lobbying. The science says that actually single-use plastic is one of the worst things in terms of harboring COVID. Medical studies show that COVID will last up to 36 hours on plastics, yet we're getting lots of messaging from particularly the Food Service Packaging Association saying that, you know, all consumers prefer single-use plastic, it seems safer, which the science basically negates. However, click on, you know, there are two ways of going about things. We have these fossil retention propositions, and often we see single-use plastic and fossil fuels being smuggled into what seem like sustainable alternatives. And then we have what are the genuine sustainable material solutions. I just want to go quickly through, you know, what we had and what we can have. So where were we pre-COVID? You know, we've had a number of solutions put on the table, and I think many of us who work in this sphere day in, day out, see an awful lot of greenwash. I think probably 2 or 3 years ago, people were getting very excited about biodegradables. Anybody can say that their product is biodegradable. Everything is biodegradable, it just depends how long. All plastics are biodegradable, it's just that that process takes about 500 to 1,000 years. So in fact, every plastic is indeed biodegradable, but that's not really what people understand by biodegradable. There is a move now to actually ban the oxydegradables. Lots of work has been done that proves they don't degrade. But also things like just saying biodegradable, saying a biopolymer or a plant-based plastic. This means nothing. These products can pollute, they can kill wildlife. They are no better than a standard PET cup, quite frankly. And when you see this kind of messaging from, you know, very big suppliers of disposable single-use plastic, an environmentally friendly option for recyclable and biodegradable tumblers, and then you look behind the science, it's actually very worrying, because no one is actually taking these companies up on this. One is, you know, basically saying this is false advertising, apart from charities and NGOs who are really having to do all the work. And then we've got compostables. I mean, some of these I would call questionable. We are lacking a compostable infrastructure in the UK and in fact on mainland Europe as well. It's a little bit better. However, there are people such as First Mile, there are other waste contractors who will collect compostables, make sure they stay in the loop and take them off for proper industrial composting. So you've got PLA, you've got cellulose, you've got a whole pile of new generation biopolymers, which are finally coming online. But then you have compostables with up to 80% of fossil fuel. So in reality, you know, if you're buying, you know, 100,000 cups that are compostable, you could actually be looking at the equivalent of 80,000 of those actually being made of fossil fuel. So there's a lot of things that you kind of need to look behind the surface. And in tests, both in home composting, but also at the big industrial composting facilities, thin-walled items or film or thin-walled items like a cup may well compost, but something rigid, solid like PLA cutlery may not even compost industrial composting. So you do need to be careful when looking at all of these things and ask for certification. And then we've got all this PPE appearing everywhere. I'm part of another alliance called A Plastic Planet. We've been working on plastic-free PPE, not PPA, PPE, which we announced. We made this public today. But you know, when you look at a typical festival or stadium, you've got so many opportunities to use plastic. And right now, everyone's wanting single use, but you really you're really struggling to find options to avoid it. However, on the good side, there is better single use. You have agri-waste options, non-tree fibers, metals, woods and bamboo. These are better because basically if we put these back into landfill, if we put these back into a recycling system, we can do something with them. So, you know, these bamboo, I post a lot of things at home to check. You know, these bamboo trays will disappear pretty quickly, even in poorly managed home composting. And then you've got things made of rice husk and all kinds of other waste, wheat waste. They also will compost really, really well because they're, you know, the bugs and the microbes love those. But really, you know, we should be going back to best in class. We've got flasks, we've got reusable glass crockery cutlery. Some reusable cups are good, not all in my mind. Fabrics, wrapping things in bits of material that can be washed, baskets, all of this should be, you know, given what we know and talking to epidemiologists, given what we know about COVID, all of these should be fine. However, you know, in practical terms and speed and consumer worries, we may well be looking at certain compromises being made in the short term. But certainly all of these options, you know, the flasks, the keep cups, and again, I'm showing metal because I'm not a big fan of plastics, these baskets, these sandwich covers in fabric, you know, rather than plastics, all of these can be sterilized perfectly well. But then you've got the other side of reusable, and again, I know there's some people on the call that may well be in this business, but I'm not a huge fan of unrecyclable reusables. If you create a reusable, make sure it either composts down or is recycled. Otherwise, it will go to landfill and produce microplastics. In fact, it can be producing microplastics during the lifetime of use, not just after use. So you've got things like polycarbonate, polystyrene, and these horrendous recycled ocean plastics, which are in fact just recycled plastics. They're a bit of a time bomb when it comes to microplastics. All of these will hang around for 500 years. They will decompose very gradually into microplastics, and that will get into water, into land, and into the air, and will come, you know, snowing down on the Arctic eventually. So not a huge fan of those. Can we stay green or go a bit greener without reusables? I mean, we have got new generation materials coming. We've got paper bottles, which suggests that we'll be able to have paper cups, and we know that COVID actually lasts the least, as its least viable life on paper and carton. We've got wheat waste packaging coming out of New Zealand using wheat in China, but this is happening in North America, happening in Europe too. We've got grass paper coming out of Germany, and then even British companies providing a much better sandwich box. No need to use a plastic skillet, because that plastic skillet's going to harbour COVID for 3 days. Look at something like AgriWrap, 47% environmental saving compared to virgin wood fibres, and even 29% compared to recycled paper. So there are options. I think there'll be a lot of debate about this in the coming weeks and months as sport gets back to being certainly having players, but you know, it's not all bad news. There are better options.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm going to hand over straight away to Alex and John. I'm sure you've rehearsed already. I don't know which one of you is going to kick off, but over to the two of you. John, you
unmuted. Hello.
Perfect.
There we go. Yeah, you'd have thought this long into lockdown I'd have remembered to unmute, but here we are. Yeah, I'm going to go first, and I think Alex and I will split this down the middle. In terms of the history of what we're trying to do at the Oval, at the Kia Oval, it all really began in 2015, and it actually came from a place it's not that we haven't ever had a green agenda, but certainly back in 2015, our green agenda was nowhere near as widespread and high on the priority list as it is now. The reason we started using reusables was not to do, as I say, with concern about our footprints and things like that. It was to do with concern of crowd behaviour. So we had a real issue. I don't know how many people have you been to the Kia Oval. We had a real issue with what we would were basically people taking disposable pint glasses and just packing them up, and creating a beer snake, which sometimes were well over 1,000, 2,000 glasses, and it was horrendous, and it was just really spoiling the experience for a lot of people. And so our journey to this point where we've got to now started there by coming up with a solution that would stop people creating beer snakes and pouring dregs of beer all over members of our crowd. We were able to turn that around, the move from single use to reusable. We turned that around in about 2 or 3 weeks, a little bit less than that. And the main reason for that was because of actually something like, it was in pre-basis days, but it was down to all the connections we had with the guys at Twickenham who had done a lot of the work themselves the previous year and couldn't have been more generous in terms of allowing us to lean on their expertise and teaching us all about all of the potholes that they found and enabling us to avoid them. Since then, so our eco journey has picked up pace. We very quickly realised that the change we'd made for crowd behaviour reasons had so many other positive impacts, and our chief exec, who lives on a house with a Tesla house battery on the side of a hill in Somerset, is very much on board, and that is obviously huge in terms of the culture at the club. We went on to partner with Sky Ocean Rescue, which we could talk about a bit later on as well. And again, Sky are obviously a huge partner of cricket and absolutely key to everything we do as a sport, and their support of our project and working with them and their expertise that they were able to bring to us with Sky Ocean Rescue was hugely useful. For us, I'll let Alex take over to talk about sort of what we're doing, what we're doing at the moment and how it developed. But for us, the focus really is a lot on single-use plastic. We do work in other areas. The ground is powered entirely by renewable energy, and certainly up until the start of the pandemic, we were really looking at getting involved in photovoltaics in quite a big way. That may or may not still be on the table, depending on obviously the position of the club as a business is now very, very different. But yeah, I'll pass it over to Alex now, who can sort of take you through a bit more about the journey we've been on in the last 2 or 3 years.
Thanks, John. Yeah, anybody who hasn't heard about our sustainability, then John isn't doing his job, because he clearly can't stop talking about it. And I suppose it's my job and my team's job to then try and deliver that agenda, which is great fun. Thanks for that, John. I think taking it more recently, about 3 years ago, we were doing, as John has said, a couple of years into the pint glass scheme, and we realised that we could do a lot more. It was in some ways a real learning process. We were partnered with Stack Cup. James is on the call. I can see him in his back garden. Tough life, James. I'm in the office, just putting that out. We partnered up with Stack Cup, and we started to grow the range of glasses we did. It was, I'm not going to lie, a challenge. We're now at the point where we do 7 different types of glasses through hospitality, retail offers. On top of that, we do carafes, we do wine bottle holders, we do everything that is all getting washed on a match-by-match basis. We do about 1 million washes, as James knows, a year of various different products, and it's turned into an absolute beast of an operation. That, combined with the fact that we have about 8 other waste streams on site that we manage, everything from coffee to food to grass to, you know, to various different elements, glass, etc. And this year we brought in the compostable solution, which I see Paul and several other people shuddering at the thought of. But we brought it in because we really wanted to challenge ourselves and to find another solution for the food waste, mainly the food packaging. So we were working with a Plastic Planet, we're working with Friends of the Earth, and we have designed or been part of a design group to get new food packaging that can go into compostable stream and could hold food hot and safely and securely for customers. That compostable waste stream that we brought in, we at no stage thought it was going to be anything other than for the food disposable element business. But of course, now we've reached a situation, bringing it up to the sort of this season, I suppose, where you know, we have got to sort of evaluate what we do in the short term. I should say that at no stage will the club in the long term change our sustainability agenda. It is driven right the way from the top board level. It's backed to huge financially supported elements of the club, which is great. Our joint venture partner Compass support on it as well. You know, and we're very lucky that we have a long dwell time on site, the ability to do multiple different serves. We're not like Premiership football. We can do all these things, and we very much consider it's our duty to try and innovate as much as we possibly can. But we also put our hands up to the fact that we get things wrong. We get things wrong a lot. But our ethos is one that we will try things, and if it doesn't work, we'll amend it and we'll try it again. Compostable is an example of that. We're sort of challenging Bywaters, our waste supplier, to try and manage this situation. We're making them sign up to all sorts of things to ensure that this actually happens correctly. But also, we're at the hands of our customers, we're at the hands of our own staff, and there's lots of challenges that are going on in and around it. So this year was meant to be a trial of this new area, and it was meant to be, as Stack Up know, we have been spending a lot of work trying to get our portfolio right for this year that matches all the different types of areas of our business. We've got the logistics behind it right, of actually getting it washed. We've got the cash element right, of understanding how to refund people. And now it was really trying to grow that out into the rest of the portfolio. This year has obviously taken a bit of a back step. We are at no point having made decisions on this year, but we are very aware of the fact that we have 3 main concerns going into this summer's cricket. One being the fact that I think we're going to get a fixture list that's late. So we'll have to react quickly. The second one is we have no idea, as most venues on this call don't at the moment, what sort of crowds we will get in, if any, this year. And I suppose the third real part of this is what are the timeline that we're going to have in order to link in with the government guidance and the health and safety protocol in order to be able to roll out a system of work. And I suspect all 3 of those agenda points are going to be late. So as Stack Up are aware, and a few other people will no doubt be aware, we are looking at other alternatives for this season. By having the compostable waste stream, although it is not perfect, and I do stress we don't pretend it is perfect, we've at least got the ability, if we go single use, to be able to go single use in a compostable form. That is not our preferred route, but it is, I suspect, the route, unless things dramatically change over the next 4 weeks, that we are going to find ourselves having to go into for this year. If that does happen, it will be a temporary measure. It will be this year only. Between ourselves, Lambeth Council, Bywaters, StatCup, we are confident we can find a solution for 2021 that will deal with whatever we have to deal with at that time. But that will take, I suspect, the entire of the winter planning in order to make sure we've got the time and the processes in place. Our concern with reusable this year, it should also point out, is not necessarily internal, and it's not necessarily from our service providers, be it StatCup, be it Bywaters or anybody. It is more from a customer perception and a customer touch point. We can manage the staff wearing PPE. We're confident, and I know that StatCup have got the right temperatures to be able to solve this problem. We can lag the service orders in order to be able to get the products into the bars in time, and long enough for it to have 72 hours, etc., with our fixture list. But what we cannot do is change public perception, and we cannot be responsible or understand what the customers are going to end up then doing when they've got that glass. We've looked into every option at the moment. We've looked into, do we give away the cup? Do we charge a redemption or take a £1 deposit and then give the money to charity? Do we give the cups to charity afterwards? All of the organisation and all the concerns around this come as well as from the customers. Also, if you imagine we have 120,000 on a match day, our T20 fixtures finish at 9 o'clock at night, roughly. By the time we've actually counted, stacked, organised, given to StatCup 120,000 of these cups, the amount of people involved in that operation is, in my view, under the current guidelines, too dangerous for us to be considering. Not when we can do a very quick, short, temporary compostable solution. But as I said, this is early days. We have not put an order in for glasses at this point. That doesn't give any rights to people to start emailing me if they supply these glasses. Please don't do that. But we haven't put an order in because we are not at that stage yet. You know, we have been lucky that we've been, I suppose, aggressive with this campaign, and it will be a step back if we end up doing it that we are not going to want to do. It is not good for our customers. They understand the way it works here now, and we're about to potentially change that for this year. It's obviously not good for the environment. It's not good for our existing partnerships and suppliers, and it's not good for our staff who understand how it works. But I'm sure I'm not the only venue on this call that is looking at these options at the moment, because realistically, with the timeframes, as I said, I think we're going to struggle to do something different for this occasion. John, what are the millions of things I've inevitably forgotten that you're going to upsell about us?
No, I don't. I think that's a pretty, in terms of the logistics of the operation, I think Alex has given us a pretty good overview there. I think one of the things Alex mentioned, which I think is important to go into a little bit more detail on, is just the support that we have at the club in terms of it's the operation, the sustainability conscience, I suppose, of the club runs through every department, really from the board level down. We don't have a vision essentially that is written down on the back of a small piece of paper that is promoted, but our vision across sustainability and across many other areas of the club is we simply try to do the right thing, and that is something that we, I think, work, you know, no matter what we're looking at, whether it's trying to play cricket again, whether it's the way we treat our fans, the way we treat our members. There's very many different ways. Do the right thing comes into how we behave as a club, and as a club, I think there's a lot of engagement with our staff. Our staff know that we're keen to innovate and we're keen to lead in this area, and I don't think anyone at Surrey would ever feel nervous about coming with new ideas. And indeed, there's a little internal group that Alex and I set up, which is known as People with High Opinions of Themselves, that tries to again become a vessel for people to feed those opinions into, and look at all, you know, whether someone says, yeah, something that's huge and it's going to cost millions of pounds, or whether someone says, oh well, you know, why don't we do this, and that's something that we can bring in tomorrow. So I think, you know, we're really lucky that to have such an engaged staff force, and their ideas sometimes brilliant, sometimes not so good, but yeah, really not afraid to bring them up. The other thing I think that is crucial for us is partnerships. Like Alex said, you know, Stack Cup are on the call. Paul, who we heard from initially, works with the Plastic Planet. They're two of our really big partners that provide us with excellent advice and support. Clearly, Bywaters, who are our waste disposal partner. Again, we challenge them a lot. They're relatively new with us. How long have we had them out? 18 months?
Yeah.
And yeah, they've had a lot of challenge from us, and they've really, you know, I think it's really admirable that they've really responded to that and are working with us, and that's a really good partnership. We have other partnerships with Fidelity Energy, for instance, who are our energy broker, who work out make sure that all the energy that powers the ground is renewable. We have a partnership with a company called Orca, who do some really innovative things around food disposal in kitchens, which is very, very interesting. One of our charity partners is Friends of the Earth, which is fantastic. They're based 10 minutes walk up the road on the Brixton Road, and again, we sort of fell into a relationship with them, which we've now beginning to formalise. And again, the expertise and the passion that they offer us really make sure, not that we would ever forget it, but you know, when you're having a charity like Friends of the Earth who are comfortable putting their logo on some of the things that we put out, really indicates to us that we've got to be getting this right, and we've got to be working hard at it at all times. And obviously, like I said, Sky Ocean Rescue. Alex was talking also about some of the charities that we work with outside of the ecological sector, and we've been able to support those charities to a far greater extent because of the renewables, because of the reusable scheme. So we've been able, on every 2020, for instance, we raised between £1,500 and £2,000 for different charities, purely by donating all the, we have about 2,000 glasses that people give back. Each of those, we could just put a pound onto the bottom line, but we decided to give that to various different charities, creating charities, and Evelyn London Children's Hospital, who is our main domestic charity partner. And again, it's just sort of multiplies, if you like. It's fantastic that we're able to get this reusable scheme working, thanks to Alex and his team's hard work, and then it has benefits that kick on down the line. So yeah, I think hopefully that's been sort of relatively interesting, and yeah, I'll pass back to Russ, who can MC the next part of his plans, unless there's anything you want to add, Alex.
Lovely, John, Alex, thank you for that practical approach from Kia Oval and Surrey Cricket. Like I said at the beginning, they certainly are pioneers in this area, and have taken it very seriously. By my count, I think Stack Cup was mentioned at least 37 times in your 10 minutes. So in the true sense of BBC fairness, I will note that we do have James from Stack Cup on the call. We also have Alex from Green Goblet, and we do have Les from Event Cup Solutions, and gents will be welcome to make a comment at some point should you wish to. I did prime James already, simply because I know he's already been on a couple of our calls previously, but obviously please do jump in with comments.
We get a free wash every time we mention Stack Cup. We get a free wash.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
No sponsorship on the basis calls. We're completely independent.
Well, perhaps I could make a few comments. I mean, I think, and hopefully Alex will concur, both in terms of Green Goblet and Alex from the Oval. I mean, I think that a couple of points really. Working with the Oval, it's obviously very much been a partnership. We've learned a lot over the last 3 years, and I think that we don't really want to lose that. I think there's a degree of pragmatism around this year, and whatever the solution will be. I mean, as a business, we're doing everything we can to fit in and adapt to our customers, and working with their customers to find the right solution. If that means no reusables this year, then so be it. But I think it's that long-term vision to ensure that we continue on the journey from next year again. Then that's fantastic. Maybe we could touch upon, I think that there are many venues out there that still haven't even tried reusables or a more sustainable solution. So we all know who those big venues are, And I guess many of them, like big festivals this year, we're going to use this year as a trial period to get up and running from a commercial logistics and so on approach. So they're not having that opportunity. So it'll be interesting that the discussion that happens between government legislators and how quickly those venues can come up to speed and learn from the likes of the Oval when they haven't actually run reusable cup schemes in the past. So I think I think that for me is a really interesting challenge for many venues coming up.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, James. We've got one person with a hand up. I will come to you in a second because you had your hand up for a while. But I just want to jump in with a quick question as well, and probably mainly to Paul, but certainly a practical aspect if John and Alex want to jump in as well. But you talked, Paul, in particular, you talked about the actual materials, the product as such, but how much of this really is down to the opportunity for processing? You know, it's about segregation, it's about processing these materials after they're available. You know, composting in the UK at the moment is quite difficult. It is a solution, and John and Alex have pushed their waste provider quite strongly that they want a compostable solution for this year. But maybe Paul first, if you can, just maybe comment on the materials and then the availability of processes to actually deal with those materials. Paul, you're muted, by the way. You can unmute.
There we go. Yeah, I'm actually quite optimistic, as I always am, because I've been pushing the sustainability boat for many decades, and only now do I actually see any progress, to be quite honest. I am confident that things are improving. There is a company called First Mile who will collect composting from anywhere within the M25, and I think they're expanding to other places around the country, and they will make sure, even if you only have a few kilos, that they will get that to a composting plant in Wales, which seems kind of crazy to ship things all the way to Wales, but they've got electric fleet, I think, or they will have. It makes sense to take it there. And certainly when you're talking about food rather than beverage, any food waste stuck on those compostables is really valuable nutrient and worth doing. So I think there is capacity. We need a lot more capacity, but certainly if you can't do reuse, I am a big proponent of compostable, as long as it's kind of lightweight and not really rigid and not full of fossil fuels. Yeah,
good point. I mean, possibly hand over to Alex and maybe expand that question to what you actually do at the Oval on the ground about your waste streams. And there has been a comment on the chat as well about information for your customers, and maybe that's one for John in terms of a comms perspective about information that's actually put up. Is there signage? How are people actually encouraged to do the right thing and put their waste in the right place, and do they do it?
Yeah, I'll pick up a couple of points. Firstly, just to add, I mean, we have a strong agenda on this, but as I said before, we don't get everything right, and we don't profess to get everything right. A lot of the changes that we made over the last 3 years has been as a result of challenging the previous waste company, going to visit the MRF, identifying the fact that it wasn't getting the same treatment as we were being told it was getting, and I highly recommend for anybody who hasn't done it to their waste supplier, I would do a little surprise visit, I'm sure most of you have, to find out what actually happens to it, because we were certainly getting sold down the river, it's fair to say, in the past, and that's why we did the move over, and we've been very aggressive on that move. I think the point, which is totally right, you know, we've almost sort of pushed ourselves beyond the ability to be able to get on top of it in some ways. This year, frustratingly, would have probably been the year we had sort of most chance of getting customers to make the right decision to answer the question that was asked on the group. But again, we spent £55,000 this year just building bin surrounds for our bins to go into, with massive signs above all of them, both internal and external. All our conference venues have got it. The office has got one at the moment that we've brought in now. And again, to try our best to get people to make the right conscious decision. Last year, I don't think we succeeded that well. It was okay, but we were not as ambitious from the public's point of view. We had dry mix recycling and compostable. We handled the glass, we handled grass, we handled food, we handled everything ourselves. By moving it onto the compostable nature for this year, or that extra stream, we knew we needed to rely on better communication, in order to be able to make people understand the right decisions, because they are confused in the most part. So, you know, we have enormous new signs over each of our bins saying exactly what item goes in there. We spent probably 4 months choosing the items that go into each of the bins. Then we had to get Bywaters to agree in writing that they would actually accept that from their compostable stream. And it was an awful lot of work, which we are lucky to be able to have the time to be able to do. Do I think we'll get it right this year? Absolutely not. I mean, I think we will do our best to get it right. We will continue to endeavour to get it right. We will lead people as much as we can, and we will react accordingly. And hopefully, in the next year or two, we can actually start getting and fine-tuning an operation where our intentions are delivered on a match day. But I think unless you start with those intentions, and unless you're aggressive on those intentions, the customers are never going to follow. So that's our kind of mantra, really, is put the right streams in place, get the right signage up there. I mean, last year, as John knows, we ended up with a steward per bin area trying to advise people on what to put in what, you know. I mean, it got to the ridiculous. Friends of the Earth were helping us with trying to provide volunteers to do it, you know, and because it is really hard, especially when people are 10 pints in. But it is it's a journey that we're going to continue doing, and an agenda we're going to keep pushing.
Yeah, just to add to that, yeah, Alex, one of the points I was going to make, you made right at the end there. So, you know, you used the phrase customers, which, you know, kind of makes me picture someone who's in a bank or a supermarket, or someone who's doing things whilst in their right mind. You know, a lot of the people we're dealing with, you're talking at people who are there 5:30 in the evening, having been with you since 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, having had their first beer at 10 o'clock and had a sort of pretty consistent consumption throughout the day. You know, you're not talking to people who are going to be willing to read 30 or 40 word signs, you're talking to people who are not going to be making a particularly cogent decision. So you really do need to make life as easy and as obvious as possible for them. We tried a little bit of nudge theory in that area as well. So actually, again, for those of you that come to the ground, generally speaking, you will find most places you go to, and it's a pretty obvious thing to say, but the bins are in convenient places where you expect them to be. When you're walking around, you go, oh, there's a bin, I will use it. We've gone to completely the other end of the scale. We've attempted to put our bins in relatively inconvenient places. We trust people to realise that littering is now no longer acceptable in this country. It's just a socially now, I just don't think people will be dropping litter as they walk around the ground. So what we've done is we don't make people search out the bins as if they're on Mount Everest, but I think a lot of the time people need to make a specific trip to the bin. Therefore, when they get to the bin, they're more likely to be making proper decisions when they get there, rather than just, oh, here's a bin, there's a bunch of stuff in my hand, I'm going to put it in the bin. By us making them go to do what we call the recycling zone, we want them to think, okay, well, I've got 4 items I need to dispose of here. Where should I put them? Rather than just making one big dump. And the other point, again, just to expand slightly on something Alex said, one of the things that's really good for us, and one of the reasons why we're really looking at the compostable route for the time being, is one of the big problems we had was with our food packaging. Obviously, we sell a lot of burgers, hot dogs, pies, chips and mayonnaise. One of the common factors of all those foods, curry, is that they all have sauces. And so actually, a lot of people were thinking, okay, great, well, here is a fully recyclable cardboard receptacle, which my food was in, I will put that in the recycling. However, they probably, having had 4 pints, they've been a bit over-eager on the ketchup and mayonnaise. And so there's a small lake of ketchup and mayonnaise in the top right corner of their vessel, and all well-intentioned, they whack that into the recycling, and that's the entire bag out, because you've got that suddenly has been spoiled. However, now all our food containers this year were going to be compostable, which would have completely removed that problem, because suddenly it wouldn't matter if you whacked in, 50 millilitres of ketchup in with your burger bun and your burger tray into the bin, because you put that into a compostable waste stream and that wouldn't be spoiled. So the key obviously was to liaise with Bywaters and to ensure that we have faith in our waste provider. As Alex said, they're not just going to go and burn it around the back of their house, they're actually going to go and properly compost it in an industrial facility. But that is hopefully solving one of the bigger problems that we found.
Brilliant, thanks, gents. I've got a couple of questions myself, but we've got some hands up from the audience. So, Paul, Derek, you've had your hand up for quite a while. You still wanted to comment? If so, can you unmute? Are you there, Paul? We'll come back. Pete Watts, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it's an observation really. I've had the pleasure of working with Alex in the past, which is always good. So one of the things which I think has come out from both Alex and John is the journey and the need to kind of implement something, be honest about it, review it, talk about it, discuss it, see what works, see what doesn't work, but then go again and keep updating and progressing and keep heading on that journey to get to where you want to. I think sports stadiums and the sport world, doesn't matter how big you are, whether you're an international venue or a small venue, it's a realization that you only have a season to kind of do things, which actually isn't very long. And you could do a lot of planning. And then once you start actually rolling through your season, it's actually quite hard, whatever scale you are, to kind of change things once you're in that mode because of messaging, publicity, just the general busyness that you're in during that season. So often these kind of things can take like 3 or 4 years to really implement well, which seems an incredible long time. But if you think of the actual match day process of venues, actually isn't that long, as in actual active days of events. So it's something which I think Alex is flagging up, and I think we all need to be aware of that as an industry, to allow venues and clubs and societies, anyone organising sport, to be given the time to go on their journey, that they won't get everything right day one. It is a way of progressing and moving forward, and it may take a couple of years to really get to the point where you're doing some really good stuff, but not be scared to start that journey. Flag up one with doing some stuff at Ascot, which is Alex's old venue. They implemented a number of things. They're kind of slightly behind where, say, Surrey are on their journey. Some of the operational aspects of that were tough, really tough, and not great. But that was all reviewed, and we're moving it forward, and it will get better. But if you looked at it in the first year of implementing some of the reusable cups, I mean, crikey, some of it was an operational, I'm not going to say disaster, but it was tough. So, but it is a process that we need to keep moving and discussing and talking about and sharing about, because then we can get to a better place through that.
And I think that's a key point, and some people have picked this up on the chat as well, that the conversation that we're having through everybody that's spoken so far, but particularly Alex and John from Kia Oval, this honesty is what we need. A lot of venues are actually quite scared to kind of put something out there and actually say they're doing things on the sustainability agenda, because it would be easy to criticize and say, well, look at what you've done in the past, or well, yeah, you're doing a bit in this area, but you're not working on other aspects or whatever. But it's having that confidence that certainly John expressed about the support from top level. It's having confidence to actually say, well, we've made a line in the sand and we've got to move on from where we are. And that really is the point that Basis wants to make in this, is that we can support any venue to actually say, we're at this point, we've recognised the impacts that we're having, and we want to move forward. And I think we've had a really good example today of a venue that is doing exactly that.
And on that note, Ross, I'll be honest, when I joined here, I mean, I was sitting with John and our chief exec saying, stop talking about this. We're not very good. You know, we're selling a dream here. And to be fair, I was sort of converted by them from their mentality of, no, we'll keep talking about it. You sort it out, you know. And it's a really good ethos to have, in a way. Of, we're going to sell this until such point as we all deliver it from an operations point of view.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. to add to that, I think, and also just one quick comment on what something that Pete said. The sort of people that contact you to say, oh, you're not doing well enough, or what are you doing in this area, or you say you do this, but I think you do. Those sort of people are really engaged people. They're really engaged with sustainability. And I think actually you've got to treat that, rather than being scared of that criticism. For us, I enjoy getting emails like that because it enables us to flag, and I can go to someone and say, hey, look, I know we mean to do this, but look, maybe this process isn't quite working. And Alex can dig down to his organisation and work out, or maybe the message isn't getting across in a certain area, or if someone comes to us with a suggestion, then it's something that we want to consider. The other thing, just to comment something on Pete said very quickly, is that he said you know people shouldn't be afraid to start this journey, and I would absolutely agree with that. And I think actually, if you're struggling to get support from the top sector, from the top of your organisations, and I know that the current pandemic, I think it may change timescales in this slightly, but legislation is coming. There's no doubt about that. There is no doubt that at some point soon everyone's going to have to do this, and it won't be an option. And if you're not there, it's going to cost you a lot of money. The market will ensure it costs you a lot of money if you have to do it very quickly. So if you're already a long way down the line, applying to legislation when it comes in will be a lot easier, and you will be thanked by people who run the purse strings, because they won't suddenly have to make a massive capex investment to make them legislatively compliant.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree. I'm going to bring in a couple of questions. Anna, are you still there? Do you want to ask a question? You're on mute.
Hi. Yes. I'm Anna. I'm from Sky, as well as sort of the very, very back person that's actually pushing a lot of the environmental agenda and also the plastic work that you probably not necessarily hear. But I have certainly heard of all you guys, because I get feedback from everything you guys do in terms of sports, and I then feedback to my colleagues who then work with you guys in terms of working especially at the beginning with Kia Oval. I'm actually really excited and glad to see all the stuff that you guys have been discussing right now to come to fruition in the past 2-3 years actually. And we'd like to see that actually keep moving forward, because it's for Sky, for us, it's our proudest moment to actually see all the sports people sort of coming onto this. And I wouldn't berate yourselves so much in one sense. I know I'm coming to my question, but I just want to say, please don't berate yourselves so much in the sense that, we haven't done enough, or we're still at the beginning stage. To be honest though, we had never foreseen something like this happening, to be honest. And for you guys to have this much compassion and this much movement is actually such an achievement for us to see. That is actually impressive, and I have to say more impressive than you could say sort of retailers have been working on this for years and years and years and not really moving much in this area in that sense, if you think about it. So kudos to you, to be honest. My question actually would be really interesting, because we get this a lot, and we're trying to grapple this ourselves. We have our own sort of way of thinking around it, but now we kind of need to take forward to the changes that we have now in our world, and that's the introduction of pandemics. And people are now very, very much aware of pandemics, the possibility of pandemics that's actually happening. And I'm pretty sure you guys have all heard in terms of the creeping back in about single-use plastics because of a pandemic world and people's worries about risk. So my question to you guys, I suppose for clubs and for sporting events and venues, is it will be interesting to know that, have you actually thought about this, and how are you going to approach this? And for the gentlemen, like Stack Cups and Green Goblet and our cups and things, how are you responding in terms of sort of communication about sort of the safetiness of reusable cups in that sense, and to ensure that we don't slide back into sort of a single-use scenario just because people are afraid about pandemics and transfer infection will transfer, basically.
I think that sounded like quite a practical question there. I'm going to give a chance. James has already spoken, but if Alex or Les does want to jump in on their practical side of things, or from that reusable cup side. Or James, I think Alex is talking. No, he's not. James, do you want to jump in and say any of the sort of practical thing? Any of the practical things?
Yeah, I mean, so it's all come upon us sort of relatively quickly. So I think the honest answer is, I think a lot of us in our industry, are hopefully speaking for everyone, is we're working it out. So, you know, clearly already we've seen various UV technologies around disinfectant. I mean, obviously the machines that are already in use when it comes to washing do a pretty rigorous job in terms of removing bacteria. But what we need to understand, for example, is how long contamination remains on a plastic cup. So that's something that we're looking at. And is there a post-process that can ensure that there is 100% chance of a cup that potentially might be contaminated, making sure that it's not by the time you finish that process. So we're on that journey at the moment, and I think, as Alex says, we'll work with him to kind of, Alex from the Oval, we'll work with him to kind of understand the risks around that and the costs of doing it, because actually adding additional process potentially adds additional cost, which is something that we need to understand. I think we then need to, again, work in partnerships with the venue to understand how many times a cup is handled and how it's handled. So, you know, clearly we've already seen people coming out and saying, well, actually it's to table service and we're going to use technology from the point of view of ordering. Already venues are trying to work out and use PPE to reduce the risk of both staff handling a cup before it gets to a customer, and how that customer then returns that cup. So all of those things, I'm pretty comfortable and confident that we as an industry will have an answer in the next, in the next month or so, but we have to take guidance from the venues that we work with on that, because it needs to fit in with the logistic approach that they take. So, you know, I would hope that, you know, we stick with reusables and venues continue down that route, which is always going to be an interesting challenge, but I'm sure it's one that, you know, I think most venues that I've spoken to will continue with.
Yeah, brilliant, James. Thank you. I'm going to move on because we've got somebody else with a hand up. Dan, do you want to ask your question? Unmute.
To be honest, it was already answered in the last question.
Perfect. We've just saved a bit of time. Fantastic. Does anybody else? I don't have any. Oh, don't have any more raised hands. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Actually, I have got one more. Can I put it to Alex? So, hi, Alex.
Hi.
In terms of the Oval, you talked about customer perceptions forcing you to consider disposables. What do you feel those particular key concerns are from your customers?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Dan, I don't think we have all the answers yet, and we're certainly, as I said, not going to make any decisions at this point. But I think if we were to open our doors next week, assuming we were allowed to, I think there is a very basic mentality where people think the more things I touch, the more problem it is. And so I have an underlying concern at this point, until that changes in people's mentalities, that we need to be delivering a service with minimal contact. And anything for this year, and again, I hope this isn't going to happen, but I suspect if it carries on the way it's looking like, we will be putting in place anything that has the least moves, in talking catering language, that we possibly can on the system. And that's where my worry about the perception is. It's similar to, I mean, we're lucky we were cashless anyway, you know, but for the venues with money, that's going to be a factor this year. We've got to, you know, I'm sure you're all thinking about how to do your conference and events business in terms of food. That's going to be even more of a problem on match days for us, and how we deal with that. But again, it's going to be this pre-packaged solution, and it's going to be minimal touch points. And as I said, while we can get the staff, you know, we will open with the staff wearing masks and gloves, ultimately the customer is not going to be wanting to touch something too many times. at the moment, and that's my biggest concern about the perception, and I sincerely hope that changes, which would allow us to be able to open up, go back into a reusable world. But until that happens, I'm worried.
Can I just jump in as well, just to address something that I've seen talked about in the chat room a little bit, and Alex can possibly chime in this as well. In terms of looking at other options to single use as well, one of the things that we've spent quite a lot of time in, and I think it's something that as an industry we could make a real impact on as a bigger, and I you know, include, I've seen comments from London too in the chat room, as well as sports organisations. As an industry, I think we can make a really big impact, is supporting companies that produce traditional products in packaging that offers alternatives to single-use plastic. So, you know, finding small chocolate companies, small crisp companies, rewarding. So we've now, one of the things that we're very proud of at the ground is we don't serve any drinks now at all in single-use plastic. Last year we just served small wine bottles in single-use plastic, but this year the plan was to move on from that. But as an industry, we've got such significant buying power as a wider entertainment industry, if you can classify sports into the entertainment industry sort of loosely. The companies that are making the effort and investing in their packaging and investing in alternative packaging, yeah, a lot of the times those companies just need investment in bigger clients and bigger orders to be able to scale up the company. And collectively, I think we'd be able to make a significant difference to companies that are making positive decisions in that area.
I'm certainly a little bit relieved we don't have to explain already why members can't buy a Kit Kat, but let's come to that. But hopefully I've delayed that by another 12 months.
And by your principles, Alex.
Yeah, there we are.
Kit Kats, definitely. We're just past 3 o'clock. The hour's flown by. For me, it's been a fascinating discussion. Paul, thank you very much for your initial presentation and talking about the alternatives. Look, it's a huge area, and we could talk about this for hours, no doubt. I've got questions that certainly I'll be seeking answers to. Alex, John, practical experience and your honesty in the discussions and the position that you're in, and everybody that's contributed on the chat and has contributed their questions as well. Always a pleasure these Wednesday afternoons. I certainly enjoyed listening to everybody and hearing what you're thinking as well. So thank you to everybody who's participating. We will let you know about next week's. We'll certainly have something coming next week. The week after, I am 90% certain that we're going to have to shift the time, because we're looking at bringing in, we're going to be talking to us about how they've already lifted their lockdown and have started to operate their venues, albeit behind closed doors. To be confirmed, but it looks like that one may be certainly an earlier start. It'll be a morning one, possibly even as early as 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. So I hope you can still join us, but that'll be in a couple of weeks' time. And then we have got Lord Deben, the chair of the Climate Change Committee, will be speaking to us in a few weeks' time as well. But we'll make sure that everybody knows about that. That will be a fascinating conversation. He's always a very, very informative speaker. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. It's not quite as sunny as it was last week and for the last few weeks. But whatever you're doing, have a wonderful day, and hopefully we will see you next Wednesday. Thank you. Bye-bye.